Are you someone who thinks the US is going to go to the and if it does, oh, that's okay. My plan B is I'm going to go over to the great old Latin America and I'm going to just park that place as my home, just stick the land of the free, land of the brave flag right in it, and I'm just going to live my libertarian lifestyle. Absolutely, that may be the case, but there are downsides. And I would say this to Justin all the time before I even went abroad. Oh, Justin, if shit hits the fan, I'm just going to move to El Salvador, Colombia, one of these countries. I mean, yeah, they're perfectly acceptable. What could go wrong? But when you haven't been to one of these places before, there is...
What could go right? Sorry, Josh, just to interject that. But go on.
No possible way that you are going to be able to you first off, you would hate your life, and I'll go over a few stories. I just got into El Salvador last night, and when you get out the airport, you start driving on this highway, and on this highway it would be very difficult to pull over on this road. If you've been here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But you just see at least, I mean, 50 to 100 people lined up just in like a farmer's market like way, all of them selling one fruit. They all have a bunch of this fruit, and they're all in a line of about 50 to 100 people selling one fruit on the side of the highway that nobody is ever going to stop at. There's no tourist area there. It's literally just it would be like you're on I-95 and there's just 100 people in a row selling the exact same hot dog. You're like, all right, like maybe someone out of these 1,000 cars is eventually going to want a hot dog, but they're not going to get a hot dog from every 100 stand. And if every person's only selling hot dogs, what do you think's going to happen? I mean, nobody is going to get that much business. It is just wildly incompetent.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when you said I-95, we're not talking about 4 lanes in each direction, flanked by 2 emergency lanes on each side, and feeder roads, you know, slow curves, gentle hills, and overpasses. We're not talking about that. Highway, when you go south of the border, you know, highway basically think like, you know, like a farm to market road if you're from Texas or like.
It's actually the roads are not too bad here, but the GPSs don't work. And when I was trying to get the address to my Uber location, it was literally impossible. What we had to do is, I don't speak any Spanish. My Uber driver didn't speak any English. And most people in this situation who thinks that they're just going to move to South America, because I was one of those people, oh, you'll just learn Spanish. But yeah, that's a gradual process. And if shit's hitting the fan, it's going to be complete chaos everywhere. But continuing on. I didn't speak any Spanish. He didn't speak any English.
Ganos inglés.
So I had to call my Airbnb host, and they were talking to each other, trying to direct, just like he was like, oh, this seems like this seems like a good left to take. Just trying to get there. I'm like, dude, what the hell is going on right now? It just makes absolutely no sense. Now, there's a time and place. Me and Justin have been to Colombia, Medellin. I absolutely love it there. And we have some close friends who live there full time. And if you are someone like that, who has a full staff of people working for you that can do all your grocery shopping, that will book all your appointments, that will do all the tedious activities, then it is a great life. But things just take a lot of time here. I mean, like when just going out to a restaurant, it's going to take you 20 minutes for a server to come over and just get your order, because that's just what it is. I mean, nobody's ever in a hurry for anything. And it's really, it is not like the United States where you are expecting competent workers everywhere, because people, it's not even because they don't like their job or anything like that. That's just the way South America is. And that's something that it's definitely a learning curve that you have to get used to. But I think the main point is, most people think that they are just going to pack their bags with their kids and family, and they're going to move over south of the border, just never being there before, just park it as home. And there is almost a 0% chance that that's going to work. I mean, it would just, if you want to find a plan B, just for heaven's sake, just spend a few months there, because you really need some time.
Yeah, I think one of the things, whenever I've gone to South America, I've always been very impressed, and I'm sort of a compliment by, you know, the people. I mean, they're very friendly. I mean, like it's like from like the social side, you know, it's great on that front. When South America when I first started hearing a lot about it, it was in the relation of when the pandemic was first kicking off, and so people rightfully were saying, okay, well, listen, you know, I kind of want to protect, you know, my individual sovereignty, particularly in regards to, let's say, their medical sovereignty. I completely get it, and I think they rightfully identified, you know, South America, Central America, and others as a potential place to go to. Again, I completely agree with that. But this is I think what's going on behind the scenes. What I think was the initial draw for, let's say, the libertarian minded set was that when you start going south of the border, competency, and that's the word that I use, starts waning rather quickly. It starts going down. And on one hand, that's good because a government that is less competent is less able to actually enforce mandates or, whatever, right? And so basically you have like the ignorance of the state apparatus, or the ineffectiveness of the state apparatus means that certain options that what a maybe more effective state apparatus could do are shut down. You can't do that. So that's time and a place for that. But the other thing too is that like and this is what I heard like over and over and over again. And, I've been around the world once or twice. And so I've seen some things. But my point is that if you think that shit hitting the fan in America is going to be bad, which is probably, or shit hitting the fan anywhere, just to be clear, is going to be bad. But if you think that there's some structural advantage to going to a less competent jurisdiction, I'm not saying there's no advantage, but I'm just saying I struggle to articulate what that advantage is going to be, particularly from this perspective of an American living in the domestic United States. Because I would say the first line of defense is, well, if you are concerned, just leave the city. If you're worried about your state, leave your state. I mean, Josh, you're up in Massachusetts, if you're a little concerned about that, you'll maybe go to New Hampshire. If you're in California or whatever you want to get out, well, maybe head over to, Arizona or Nevada or whatever, or Texas, or no, actually, don't come to Texas if you're from California. We're full. Go away. We don't want any more. But my point though is that like, I think there's these various like, like a fallback plans you can go through before you actually pick up bags and leave, because unless you actually have been abroad, it just doesn't, I mean, I can't even describe it, because like it doesn't register the level of friction that you have to go through that you are not used to going through if you're an American or a Western European. Like it's like people, how would I describe it? Like Colombia is a good example of this. So when you and I were in Medi, and Colombia is one of the better ones. Colombia and Chile they are actually competent, at least as far as you can say for South America. But even then, like you talk to someone and like they just kind of like look at you, and even if you're speaking Spanish, like there's not, the minds down there are much more. I would say they run on rails, and you can't deviate from these rails, even if a deviation would make perfect sense, or it's very, there's a lot of inference that goes on. And again, like I said, if that's your thing, that's your thing. It's perfectly fine. But if you've gotten used to it and you don't realize you've gotten used to it, it will be, or I would argue it will be sorely missed when you don't.
That is actually the most perfect explanation I've ever heard. Like there's only one way to do things, and going off that track is feasibly impossible. But if someone shows them how to do it, then they're like, oh yeah, like why didn't you tell me this before? But they would never, ever go off that rail. And it doesn't even make sense. And this is, I mean, it's not South Americans, it's just South America. I mean, I don't understand it. It's just really just the way that they were raised, and it's ingrained into their society. For better or worse, if you are a complete libertarian and wants to live like an anarchist style life, you could go to a Strata 1 in Medellin, to the super poor neighborhood. There's no cops, there's no taxes, there's literally nothing. There is no rule of law at all. And that I guarantee I'm going to spend quite a few months living in South America in a lot of times, and I do enjoy it. But you have to know there's pros and cons. I would not want to have my plan B if in the fan in Massachusetts for my first time ever get off the plane in El Salvador and find a home. That is not what I would want. Like that would be the worst case scenario, because if you know how stressful it was getting to this Airbnb and like doing all this stuff, imagine you have your whole life with you and you're trying to figure this out. I mean, you are going to be just so utterly screwed. But if you spend a lot of time here already, I think it's a perfectly reasonable place to reside. I mean, a lot of places in South America are just lovely. I mean, the people are just so much nicer, way more pleasant to be around. In my opinion, the wokeness is not here. I really enjoy the food, super good. It's relative, it's pretty cheap. So in all those aspects, it is fantastic. But I would not reside a plan B in a country that you have never spent any time in. I think that is one of the worst situations you could put yourself in.
Yeah, and especially if you're in a shit hitting the fan scenario, like in a shit hitting the fan scenario, like the United States, it has its faults, but one of its strengths, I think, is its resilience to this. And lastly, in closing, I will say too, as I said before, if you were worried about your personal medical sovereignty, which is perfectly acceptable, even in the worst of what the United States did this last cycle around, you were still protected. Now you might have been coerced or whatever, right? But the point is that, to the best of my knowledge, there were never any state mandated never any state mandated medical treatments that were forced upon the population. So I might be wrong on that. If I am, let me know. But my point is that even here, you know, things.
Well, in places
things
like
go
New
for
York,
us.
you need them to go on like the subway stations and to eat at restaurants. I mean, that's as harsh of a restriction as you get. But it wasn't like Israel
No.
where they were forcing every single person. But in South America, I think it would actually be easier to get around being coerced and something like that, because the incompetence would work in your favor, because the workers there do not want any extra hassle. I mean, if you're not wearing a mask, let's say during the peak of their cerveza sickness, the worker might say, "Okay, please put it on." If you don't put it on, they are not going to be like an American that is going to force you to put it on. They are just going to let you go on with your day.
Yeah, the state apparatus does not like does not have the competency to roll out a force mandated compliance.
Yeah.
So
and
that's for pros and cons. So.
Yeah, there's pros and cons of everything. But Justin is definitely in this boat, and I've shifted my view. I think the U.S. is actually much better off, especially if a place like this.
Parts.
Yeah, parts. But I mean, there's parts of Medellin that I would feel a lot safer in than on parts of the U.S. right now. That is absolutely for sure. And El Salvador too. These places are pretty nice aggregate total. But anyway, getting off the topic. Thank you. We'll see you in the next one.